Thank you for participating in our talk today. And this is the talk is going to be about Wikipedia translation. Our speaker, Professor Mark Shuttleworth, is currently professor and acting as head of translation department and in the translation studies department in Hong Kong Baptist University. And Mark's research interests cover translation technologies, Wikipedia translation, and metaphor translation, and he has published many journal articles, book chapters, and monographs that center on the preceding topics. Today, Mark is going to share with us his findings in the translation contents of Wikipedia, a site I believe all of us know. Being a platform that accommodates some text in various translations, we cannot help wondering how translators play a role in this site. So during the walk, if you think of any questions that you would like to ask the speaker in the Q&A session, please send to me via private chat first so that we can avoid repetitive questions. And I will call your name later in the session. So now, Mark, I give the floor to you.
Well, thanks very much, Yichao. Thank you for your kind words of welcome. And it's great to see you again. Yichao and I have known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
He actually had the misfortune to have me as his supervisor for his PhD at Imperial College, going back a number of years now. So
Yeah.
Great to see you. It's lovely, we've managed to keep in touch, and thank you so much for the invitation.
Great to see you again too.
Good to see you. So thanks a lot. So let's get going, shall we? And just to double check, I guess I was going to say, can you all hear me? And I guess if anyone can't hear me, they will have messaged Alex or Yichao or whatever, but I will assume you can hear me. And I'm going to be talking about what I describe as Wikipedia's dark matter. And this, of course, is a metaphor from astronomy or cosmology, because as I'm sure you are aware, this substance called dark matter inhabits the universe, and we don't know, scientists don't know a lot about it, and they don't know how much of it there is, and they don't know where it is either, and it's difficult to detect. So I use this as a metaphor for the translated material that Wikipedia contains. Occasionally you read an article and it says this is a translation, or this includes translated material from the, like, I don't know, from the Japanese Wikipedia article on the same subject, or the French Wikipedia article, so on. But much more frequently, editors will just translate. They will bring, not necessarily whole articles in, but little extracts, and they will add it to the article that they are editing, and we're not aware that it's there, and indeed we're not aware of how much of it there is. So understanding Wikipedia's dark matter, I could have said detecting and understanding Wikipedia's dark matter, because obviously to start understanding it, you have to find it first of all. So my research has been to work out methodologies to enable us to locate what looks like translated content in Wikipedia, and then also to try and understand how it fits into the bigger picture, wider picture of Wikipedia editing, and how it perhaps supports so-called neutral point of view or goes against neutral point of view, and so on. So let's start. I'm going to start with a few jokes or a few light-hearted slides, but do bear with me. We'll get on to more serious stuff in a minute. So let's launch off straight away with Michael Scott. I'm sure many of you will, perhaps not everyone knows who this is, from the American comedy series, The Office. And he had the reputation for, saying sometimes rather stupid things. So this is his take on Wikipedia. He said, Wikipedia is the best thing ever. Anyone in the world can write anything they want about any subject. So you know you are getting the best possible information. Now, another slightly more serious quote on Wikipedia has it that the trouble with Wikipedia is that it only works in practice. So you can have anybody, basically, that's the theory, anyone can edit any article. It's more complicated than that in practice. And yet it shouldn't work. And yet somehow it produces, it's in the process of producing, constantly producing, creating this massive international, multilingual encyclopedia that we all consult. And I am including myself in this. I tend to discourage my students from using Wikipedia for referencing purposes in art, in essays and so on. But I use Wikipedia multiple times every day, I have no doubt, just to check things up, just to get a basic idea of things subjects I'm not familiar with. And that's the purpose, I guess, most of us use it for. It also has an ideological side to it. I think, although I'm not going to address this explicitly, it's all lurking in the background, the idea, well, certainly the idea point of view. The articles I'm going to, and the examples I'm going to share with you are based around politics. So you can see how different constructions are put on events, potentially in different language versions of the various articles I'll be looking at. Okay, now let us consider, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Here we are, the face of Wikipedia. What would be the face of Wikipedia? Well, we all know that it was founded by Jimmy Wales, slightly more than 20 years ago. It was founded in 2001. But this is not the person whom I have in mind as the face of Wikipedia. Wikipedia has at least one mascot of its own, somehow representing a personification of Wikipedia. That's what she looks like. She's called Wikipitan. Okay, and you'll find many depictions of Wikipitan online if you care to look for her. And somehow she's meant to embody something about Wikipedia. I don't know the extent to which you think that's true, but anyway, that's been produced by Wikipedians themselves, based on the traditions of Japanese animation, of course. I'm not au fait really with what a Mo anthropomorphization is. It's a genre of manga drawing, I guess. And they are designed to elicit a loving response or protective response from the audience. So I guess we should all be protective of this this thing that's been created online that calls itself the Free Encyclopedia, although that is, of course, we can understand free in different senses, but it's something potentially very valuable and in need, deserving of our protection. Okay, so I don't know why, I guess it was partly for that reason they decided to anthropomorphize the encyclopedia as a cute young girl. This comes from, this itself is a quote from Wikipedia. I tend to stick to the principle that if you're going to, that you should use Wikipedia to study Wikipedia. There's a huge amount of self-reflection on Wikipedia. And there's also evidence of the impact that Wikipedia has had and continues to have on our thinking. And it has left a stamp, left a mark on the English language, which continues to develop and to grow. There was a site called the Urban Dictionary. Maybe some of you, do you know the Urban Dictionary? It's a crowdsourced dictionary. It contains, I don't know how many words, large number of words, current trending words. I guess there are probably quite a lot of made up words as well. I don't know. And there are literally hundreds of neologisms, words and phrases inspired by Wikipedia. So just to give you some comparison, different other, well, social media sites, other sort of vaguely comparable sites to Wikipedia have engendered large numbers of words. Twitter 700, Google 850. These are slightly out of date figures actually, but you get the idea. Wikipedia is already the subject of 700 items on Urban Dictionary. Translation only gets 13 mentions by way of comparison. So what are these? What are some of these? Well, here's an extract from the list. Okay, I doubt if you'll hear these in use. And in fact, as it says, these are many or possibly all of them are neologisms that have been defined by the users. So just to home in on a few of them, you get wiki agnostic, somebody who is skeptical about anything until they hear, skeptical about anything they hear until they look it up on Wikipedia. I guess I'm a bit like that myself sometimes. Wiki mongering, the annoying habit that some people have of allowing Wikipedia to permeate every factor of their life, to the extent that they must draw a connection to Wikipedia in every possible situation, appropriate or not. Yes, I guess that's me again. Wiki Golf, I've never played this, it sounds loads of fun. Choosing 2 completely random pages on Wikipedia and seeing how many pages it takes you to get from one to the other using only links on the page you're on. And then wiki pawned, to take information from Wikipedia, put it in your essay. Nobody ever does that, of course, I know. And then have someone tell you that the information is wrong in your presentation. I guess that's always a possible risk. But the trouble is people tend to badmouth Wikipedia and say the information is unreliable. Well, I largely contest that. And I think you have to be careful of any source. But Wikipedia has antibodies against incorrect or misleading information. And a lot of it gets edited out. Not all of it, no doubt, but a lot of it gets edited out, particularly on mature pages with a long history. And when they've done comparisons with other encyclopedias, Wikipedia has turned out to be comparable in terms of its reliability. Right, we're going to get going with some actual more academic stuff in a minute. I've just got one more fairly light-hearted thing to share with you. And that is the embroidered version of Wikipedia. I saw this in the British Library a few years ago. It was on display, a complete Wikipedia article, embroidered. In other words, stitched onto fabric. And there it was. And it's a representation of the English article on Wikipedia. produced by an artist by the name of Cornelia Parker. And you can see how you can get an idea of the size of it. 13 meters in length. It doesn't quite look that long, but it is really long. And there it is, frozen in time. You can't do a quick edit on this, unfortunately. I suppose it's partly making use of the metaphor that lies behind the English word text, because text means something that has been, it means like a tissue or a fabric. That's the etymological meaning of text. And it's taking that and making it literal. Okay then. So let's have a slightly more formal introduction to Wikipedia then, shall we? I screenshotted this about half an hour ago, so it's fairly up to date. And I've watched this develop over the years. Of course, the well-known logo. It's actually quite interesting to trace the development of the logo. It's reached a fairly stable state now, though, I think. You would have thought that these were the biggest 10 Wikipedias, but in fact they are not, and haven't been that for quite a long time. Probably they started off like that. There are a number of very large ones which are excluded. The Swedish one is excluded. The Cebuano one is excluded. That's a local language from the Philippines. The Waray-Waray one is also excluded. That's another local language from the Philippines. And those three have been developed automatically by bots, and they consist of millions of stub articles with basically no content. So they've been excluded. Vietnamese is another very large one. That's been excluded. Dutch has been excluded. That's a large one too. And instead, and I haven't seen this before, I don't know why, but they are including the Finnish one. That's Suomi, third one down on the right. That's the Finnish language. And they're including Bulgarian as well, fourth one down on the left, Bulgarski. I haven't actually checked this out for a number of months, and I'm wondering maybe they are circulating a number of languages, and it happens to be the turn of those two. But this is not the top 10, the biggest 10, which one might expect to be the case, but it is not, in fact. As a matter of fact, there are about 14 or 15 different versions which have exceeded 1 million. English was the first to reach the million mark, and as you can see, it's currently at 6.5 million pages. The Chinese reached the 1 million mark. About 4 years ago, I would say, and it continues to grow quite slowly, but it's growing all the time, as indeed are all the other versions which you see there. And that will be top right, that's Russian, and then going down French, Finnish, Japanese, I'm sure you know, and then German at the bottom. And then on the left, well, I don't think you need me to say what the second one is. Then Polish, then Bulgarian, and then Spanish. And these are all, yeah, I mean, even the Bulgarian, it's still pretty big. And it shows, you know, how far the encyclopedia has traveled over the last 21 years. Now, Wikipedia, I put a couple of, I put a few contrasting tendencies by which one can characterize Wikipedia, maybe all the editing work also of it goes on in Wikipedia. The editing takes place. It's a kind of contrast or a tension between collaboration and self-motivation. And sometimes you get editors working as far as they are aware, to all intents and purposes, independently, in a way that is self-motivated, and yet the net result is a kind of collaboration. So it's often an unintentional, unplanned collaboration, but it is ultimately collaborative. And there are spaces on Wikipedia for a more deliberate type of collaboration. There is potentially a high level of traceability, and there are a lot of different ways in which information on Wikipedia can be documented and you can track. I'm going to show you a little bit later on, towards the end, some of the ways in which you can track the provenance of wording on Wikipedia. But at the same time, you can make your contribution actually completely anonymous. You can be visible, you can be invisible as an editor. There is a high level of potentially of researchability. And I mentioned about how one can use Wikipedia itself to study Wikipedia. I also talk of Wikipedia as a research ecosystem in its own right. It provides significant amounts of information about itself, but at the same time, it can be quite opaque, and the information that you want to find can be a bit difficult to tease out. And then the last contrasting pair I've suggested is, on the one hand, democratization and empowerment. We think of Michael Scott again, and anyone can edit any article they like. As I said, there are power games at play, and it's not always that easy, but in principle, that's how it works. But at the same time, because of the potential opacity, invisibility, anonymity, you don't always know who is lurking behind a particular username. And is it a single person? Is it a group of individuals? Is it an organization? Is it a secret service? In the case of politics, you just don't know. You can build up suspicion, obviously, in the case of specific usernames, but it's not at all apparent. Okay, now let's move on to the next slide. I have been interested in Wikipedia on a research level. I guess I started to look at it in 2014, and I gave a presentation at the IARTIS conference in Brazil in 2015, and it's been one of the things I've been working on since then. And I've already described to you a little bit about dark matter, the translated material in Wikipedia. I'm interested in getting an idea how much there is, and also working out a methodology to discover where it is, and then also what the function is that it plays in Wikipedia. And I'm interested in this notion of point of view, and in particular the idea that they promote that editors should aim for a neutral point of view, which of course is impossible to achieve. And the idea that each language version of a particular article will inevitably convey a particular bias, a particular stance, political point of view. It will promote certain narratives potentially, and you look at another language version of the same article and you will see different points of view being put across. I've been working on a funded project at Baptist University, funded by the Hong Kong government. There is an ongoing blog. I've put some information up there if you're interested in having a look. I'm going to talk about one of the major outputs of this project a little bit later on. I'm going to mention it. It's actually a tool designed, it's an alignment tool designed to help identify potential translation equivalencies across two articles. And then there was a conference that we held at Baptist University last December, and hopefully that's going to lead to one, or hopefully we're planning in fact 2 publications from that. A few words quickly on how Wikipedia, or how research into Wikipedia translation fits into translation studies research in broad terms. And I see, well, I mean, a lot of research is curiosity driven, and there is certainly that element to it. One is motivated by a desire to understand the object of study. And this is, in this case, to better understand the processes of knowledge transfer and knowledge production, and the role that translation plays in that context within the encyclopedia. And then also thinking of existing research directions in the discipline to provide raw data for looking at certain other ideas or concepts that are already of interest to translation scholars. But also looking at Wikipedia translation as an example of a new type of translation, online, collaborative or semi-collaborative, participatory translation. And this fits in within, I'm sure you know the Holmes map of translation studies. It actually has a place in all the 3 branches that he proposed: the theoretical, the descriptive, and the applied. So sorry, I said slightly the wrong thing. It might be true actually what I said, but it wasn't quite what I was intending to say. I beg your pardon. Within descriptive translation studies, what I meant to say, you can study it from the point of view of product-oriented, process-oriented, and function-oriented translation studies. And so it's not my main interest at the moment, but earlier on, I guess it was the characteristics of the translated text that you find in Wikipedia, the types of transfer that occur between different editions, and what the sort of net result is in terms of what the translation looks like. I'm going to touch on that quickly later on. What the nature of a Wikipedia article is, particularly when it contains translation, but Wikipedia articles that contain translation may be thought of as a special case. And they are a kind of patchwork or collage, potentially, with lots of fragments of different lengths put together. And then, of course, the point of view that is conveyed, or the set of points of view that are conveyed in an article. And of course, I talk about a product, but with Wikipedia, you don't get a finished product, because Wikipedia articles, by definition, are works in progress. They don't have an end point. They are always potentially evolving and developing. Many of them reach a fairly stable state, but that's not to say that they won't continue to develop. Then when it comes to the process type of translation studies research, we can look at translating practices, editing practice, collaborative practices, and so on. One thing I'm developing an interest in also is translation flows. Where does the material that's translated tend to come from? What are the standard sources? Well, one of them obviously is English, but what other standard go-to versions of Wikipedia are there? And what's the volume of translation that occurs? And there are various ways you can begin to get an idea about that. And then Wikipedia translation as a contributing factor to knowledge production and point of view promotion, possibly also narrative promotion, and so on. And then the function in the broad, when Holmes talked about function-oriented, function was intended in a very broad sense, as not only the purpose behind a type of translation, but also the sociological context, the political context, the ideological context in which it was occurring. So all of those are certainly of interest. And then indeed the use of Wikipedia in translation pedagogy. That's something you hear about increasingly, and there were contributions at the conference I mentioned back in December that were addressing that. Who are the translators? Who are the editors? What's the contribution they make? What seems to be their background? Sometimes you get a lot of information about their background. What motivates them? Are they working by themselves? Are they collaborating? And so on. So there are lots of different approaches to the study of this topic. And as I say, lots of information available in the encyclopedia itself. Now, I'm going to briefly present to you a couple of case studies. These do go back a few years, but I've looked at them in quite some detail, and I continue to look at certainly one of them. And I'm going to talk about them very briefly in general terms. And then I'm going to look at one of them in a little bit more detail. Then we're going to move on to look at some examples of fairly complex translation events that have taken place in the article that I studied in each of these two case studies. So I am by training a Russianist, and these both relate to Russian politics and Russian current affairs, but from a few years back. I haven't yet had the opportunity to study the massive amount of information there is on different Wikipedia versions about the Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. But that's something I'm planning to get to once I have the chance. So the first of these is an event that took place 7 years ago now. And this was the assassination in central Moscow of opposition leader Boris Nimsoff. Maybe you heard about it at the time. It shocked the world. I was looking to see how this was reflected in Wikipedia, how Wikipedia reported on it, how it chronicled the events. This was, obviously it was a suddenly, really rapidly breaking news story and the Wikipedia editors set to work straight away. And it's interesting to see how the accounts of this event developed very rapidly over the hours and days after the murder. So this was, at the time when I studied it, there were 9 language versions, and I looked at them all, some of them with the aid of Google Translate. There are now 10. I haven't looked at the 10th one, that's French. And then the other one, this took place a few years later in the UK. It was an attempted poisoning of a former Russian Secret Service agent and his daughter, who happened to be staying with him, and they were living in the English city of Salisbury. And once again, this was widely documented in Wikipedia, and at the time I was studying this most intensively, this existed in 17 language versions. Okay, now I'm just going to look at this second one. I'm just going to show you a few figures and a bit of background information about this, the Wikipedia articles relating to this second case study. So these are the different versions as they existed at that time. And you can see slightly random selection of languages. You get the ones you would expect. You get the ones for the countries that were directly involved. And you get other major world languages, such as Chinese, such as French, other languages as well. I noticed that, interestingly, for example, German isn't there. And you even get an invented language, Lojban, number 5. Somebody decided to chronicle this in Lojban. Do we have any speakers of Lojban here, I wonder? I would be surprised. And editing some of these articles is a major operation. You can see at the point at which I measured this, which was I think about a month after the events occurred. The Russian version had been edited 1,672 times. The English version had been edited 1,298 times. That's a lot of editing, and some of these could be very minor edits, but some could involve the addition or indeed the removal of a fairly significant amount of text. And then the number in brackets, here we are, 141 and 296. Those are the number of editors involved, and then also we get the length in words. Okay, and we get some really short ones. Irish has a marginal presence, as indeed does Thai. The Lojban manages a little bit better. It's got a little bit more about it. Okay, now going on to the next one. This is an example of what I mean when I say you can use Wikipedia to study Wikipedia. This is an automatically generated list from the LangViews tool which is available for any page. If you go to the edit history, which is one of those other tabs, I don't know if you've ever investigated, there are 4 or 5 tabs at the top of each Wikipedia article, and most people just read the article, understandably. But there's always another one there called, it's generally called something like edit history. And if you go to that, you can get, you will find links to this tool and a number of other tools. And it will generate large amounts of statistics and figures about the page you're interested in. And this tells you how many people have looked at, or at that point had looked at this different articles, but well, within a date range of about 3 weeks. And it gives you the national, the daily average and so on. And this is for all 17 of the articles. Okay. And this is a screenshot of the English page as it appeared on the 14th of April 2018. And that was the title. And the title itself, the choice of wording for the title can itself be a political or ideological statement. And often there is debate in the talk page. That's in one of the other tabs at the top of each Wikipedia article. What should we call this? And you know, one editor might propose changing the name, and assuming consensus is reached, the name will be altered, or it could stay as it has been before. And it's sometimes quite interesting to look at the different choice of the choice of words in the different language versions. Okay, and we see the table of contents obviously at the top, and this is 5,500 words. And then I suspect most of you probably are not Russian speakers. Oh, I beg your pardon, we just have this to look at before we move on. So that's the table of contents as it was, and we get the responses from the UK, from Russia, Russian government, Russian state media, and then we get weapons experts from Porton Down. That's the chemical weapons research establishment in the UK, the main one, and then also from Russian scientists and intelligence officers, and then responses from other countries and organizations, and you can see how they're grouped and how they're ordered and where the emphasis lies. And then onto a separate section about the expulsion of these Russian diplomats, and I'll be talking about that later. And then onto the article itself. So yes, as I was saying, I suspect that very possibly most of you are not particularly speakers of Russian, but I did still want to show it to you. So it's a longer article, it was at the time, although with fewer editors, as you may have noticed. And one thing that you'll have also seen is that the image is, well, it's part, that's part of this image, but it's basically it's the same image, and there's a lot of image borrowing from one Wikipedia version to another, and that of course is another way in which one article can influence another. And of course the selection of images itself is another expression of point of view. So here's the table of contents, and it starts with 3 points about poisoning. And then number 2, section 2 is about the investigation And then the third is about the reactions on a state level. And it starts with the UK, then it goes on to Russia, then 3.3 is the USA, 3.4 is People's Republic of China, and then 3.5 is other countries. And then you get the reactions of international organizations, and you have the UN Security Council, and you get the organization for the I've forgotten what it's called in English now. For the limiting of chemical weapons, should we say, and then we get NATO. And then you got something about diplomatic conflict. And then the comments, number 6 is the comments of research scientists, or sorry, research chemists, I beg your pardon. And then you get comments, discussions in the media, first of all, the West, 7.1, then Russia, and then China. And it's interesting that China is in the table of contents is being mentioned explicitly. I don't think it was in the English one. 3.4, People's Republic of China, 7.3, China. And then 8 is other incidents and their possible connection with the poisoning of Sergei Skripal. And then you just get the C also in the articles and the notes at the end. Okay. So, I mean, obviously, English has a special significance, not only because this event took place on British soil, and therefore it is the major local language, but also because of the special status of English Wikipedia, and it is inevitably the go-to version that editors will turn to if they editors in other languages. If they're going to turn to any other version, chances are it will be English. And then the Russian, obviously, that's the other main interested country. And then I thought I would also include something, well, a screenshot of the Chinese version as it was at the time. Once again, we have the same image. It's a little bit shorter, but of a comparable length. Far fewer editors involved here as well. You may notice only 18 editors. And you don't need me to struggle my way through the table of contents. But you can see the different countries that are highlighted in section 3. Interesting that the Czech Republic 3.4 is highlighted as one of the main ones. And then, of course, in 3.6 and 3.7, this lets drop a significant factor in Chinese Wikipedia, which is that it's edited by a very broad body of editors who are distributed internationally. And in its raw state, an article can contain content, can contain text in both simplified and traditional styles. Okay, there it is. Just got 2 or 3 examples of translated sentences, and these had to be detected, sometimes quite painstakingly, sometimes using actual tools, online tools to assist it, because you need to know, you need to be quite sure which came first as well, apart from anything else? Was it translated from English into Russian or from Russian into English? And chances are that in most cases it will be translated from English into Russian, and indeed that was what happened here. And they are both using the same source, of course, and then the source just gets copied across in this case. And so what we end up doing, we end up having to track an example of translation. And this is often I've done this using a tool called Wikiblame. And this is not to identify translation pairs, but it's to work out, as I said, which one came first, because Wikiblame will tell you the first version of an article in which a particular word or a phrase occurs. So it will give you an idea which one was first in a pair of wordings. And you can pinpoint, using that, you can pinpoint the appearance of a piece of text to a particular edition. This was on the 12th of March, 2018 at a particular time. Okay, and then the Chinese one actually it comes about 3 weeks later, doesn't it? And you can trace key phrases and how they get rendered in other languages. And I'm going to be returning to this one in one of my more extended examples shortly. You can see if there's been an apparent attempt at manipulation or whatever. So this was a prominent speech by the Prime Minister at that time, Theresa May, saying that it was highly likely that the Russians were involved in this. Of course, that hasn't ultimately been proved, but obviously there's still a high level of suspicion. In the Chinese version, even though there's no expectation that users will know Russian, the bibliography has a couple of sources in Russian. Okay, so there are going to be 4 examples that I'd like to unpack to some extent. And the first one concerns this speech in the House of Commons given by Theresa May. And we see a shift in point of view here in the translation. So let's have a look at it. She says, I won't read the whole thing, or I beg your pardon, perhaps I will actually. Or the Russian government lost control of this potentially catastrophically damaging nerve agent. This was the nerve agent called Novichok that was used, and allowed it to get into the hands of others. And then there's a vital difference in the Russian, and that's that the allowed it to get is missing. And it just says, and it got into the hands of others. И он попал в чужие руки. That's what it says at the end. It seems to be a deliberate manipulation. I'm slightly doubtful now as to whether that's the case. I've looked at it in a bit more detail. There's probably not time to go into the details. But it's a question of using the editors in the 2 versions use different sources. And in fact, the Russian text comes from the Russian text as it was given on the BBC Russian service website. So it seems that there is in fact no manipulation by individual editors here, which is interesting. Okay, so no deliberate translator manipulation. And then also the Russian does contain the original, it provides the original wording as well. So if you speak Russian, if you speak English and are using the Russian version, you can check. And the wording, as I showed you, comes about through what I do tend to call a passive collaboration between editors. There's no overt collaboration, but they're all working towards the general goal, which is to produce a wording which everybody is happy with. And somehow their individual efforts come together and contribute to, I won't say the final wording, but hopefully what ends up being a stable wording. Second one, this is the name of the Finnish president. And as you saw from the tables of contents, each of these articles, or certainly the Russian and the English, I can't remember about the Chinese, have long sections devoted to international reactions. Yes, Chinese as well, of course. Yes, it did, didn't it? Yeah. And in the English and Russian ones, his words were used. And let's have a look and see what he said. So he stated that the murder of Boris Nimsoff was a ferocious and reprehensible act. These words would have originally been in Finnish. And quoted here in English translation, obviously. He suspected political reasons behind the killing and expressed his worries over consequences. Okay. So that was on the 28th of February at 1517. 28 minutes later, the following wording was added to the Russian page. Okay, so it says that, he called the murder of opposition leader Boris Nimsoff a ferocious and reprehensible act. Niinistö observed that he had known Nimsoff personally. So is this a manipulated translation? It looks like an act of translation. It's probably not, in fact. It probably comes from the original source. And if you look at the original source, that is the sequence of sentences. And that he suspected political reasons, that he did say that, but it comes from later on in what he said. So in fact, it's the English wording that's more of a manipulation than the Russian one. Okay. Now, yes, sorry, I said 4 examples. I've only got 3, in fact. So we'll move on to the third example now. I'm just going to check the time. Okay, we're doing reasonably well. I've got another up to 30 minutes, I believe, if need be, haven't I? Is that correct? So the diplomatic expulsions table. I said there were expulsions of diplomats, as often happens when there's a significant, serious international disagreement. Just sorry, just glancing ahead. Okay, that's fine. Now this is the beginning of the English language table of expulsions, listed alphabetically, all occurring around about the same time, and then it gives the numbers of diplomats expelled. And I'm giving the English first, but in fact, it first appeared in Russian. And as far as I can tell, it was taken from an infographic on the BBC News website. And it got added, you can see the dates on which it was added to the English and then to the Chinese, and it was also added to other versions of this article. Okay, this is the Russian. And immediately you see a difference. That's the alphabetical listing. And the Russian one lists by size of the expulsion. And in fact, the BBC News website also lists it by size. So this is fairly close to the original source, whereas somebody working into English has done a reordering, perhaps to take the heat off the UK a bit, I don't know. But anyway, it's happened, and we start with Albania and Australia, and Great Britain is hidden a little bit further down. Okay, Russian also adds countries to the original list. There's the English one, there's the Chinese. Okay, so it's if I understand correctly, it's using the English alphabetical order. Okay, and 4 countries are added, including the Republic of China, and that's based on two Taiwanese sources, which have been drawn on. So it's a question of foregrounding. Are you going to hide the extent to which each country has engaged in this diplomatic game? Or are you going to foreground this? And different Wikipedia versions make different choices. Okay, then, so those are the 3 examples. And you can see you can see from them that it is quite striking, the differences that you can find between different language versions of a single article. But at the same time, you have to be a bit careful pointing the finger of blame in one direction and saying that, oh yes, this is clear evidence that a particular group of editors have been manipulating, and it's not always the case, and you have to be quite careful before you attribute responsibility, or before you get an idea of the exact sequence of events and what sources were being used and where the information, where the wording came from. On a slightly different tack, I'm going to go back to the idea of dark matter, and I'm going to, I produced a table of a limited number of languages and how much translation in relative terms takes place between them. And here is the table. And this is not relating to a particular case study. This is in general terms. And it's taken from a set of Wikipedia pages, once again, using Wikipedia to study Wikipedia. And it's from the category translated pages. And these get listed automatically. Wikipedia has a way of detecting translation that is declared formally using the proper way. And so you can see that there are a total of over 40,000 articles which have been translated from, or which contain translated material from English into Russian, and 16,500 from English into Chinese. And it could be an entire article, or it could just be a paragraph or even less text. And this is one of the ways in which you can get an idea as to how much translated information there is. And it seems to be the case that there is quite a lot, and even a fair amount translated into English. The figures for information translated into English, so the figures tend to be lower than those for what's translated out of English, but still sometimes there are fairly substantial amounts. And as for Korean, it's got the question marks simply because that information is not provided in the Korean edition of Wikipedia. And of course, there's loads more translation that we don't know about directly. But this is one of the ways in which you can get an idea of the amount of translation traffic there is. And the other one, which I won't talk about now, there's something called the content translation tool. Some of you may have come across this. It's like the official tool that Wikipedia makes available for anyone who wants to translate an article. And you can access the statistics there as well. There are different ways also. I mentioned about sources, references listed at the bottom. There are different ways in which these can be exploited. And I've listed them here. Translation from the other article, referencing the source, translation direct from the source. But the sources are of quite a high level of significance when it comes to looking at a translation in the encyclopedia. And then sometimes the sources are cited without them being used. But sometimes there is indirect translation, in other words, two-stage translation, frequently, but not always via English. And then sometimes sources are just included that have a direct bearing on the point of view. And then another type of dark matter, we don't know how many unacknowledged, how many sources get used in an unacknowledged manner, of course. Focusing on the Skripal articles, which we've been looking at, they do contain a very large number of sources. And you can see the third column, the number of references in the native language and where they come from, and then also the number of references in other languages. And a lot of them occur, they just appear automatically. You know, someone in the English page, in the English article uses a source in Latvian or in Finnish. And then Russian editors, Chinese editors will not necessarily access that themselves, but the source just gets copied across, obviously. So the presence of a reference in a different language it's not inevitably a sign that translation has taken place. Okay, so I've mentioned this already. Allowing the nerve agent to get into the hands of others, and then just saying it got into the hands of others, where the blame seems to be removed from the Russian side. And I've said how this discrepancy in wording came about. But you can say that it was allowed to stand. I believe that the English version is the correct one. And it could be that a manipulation took place at an earlier stage. It could be that the wording, the change in wording on the BBC Russian website was a deliberate intervention by a translator. We don't know. But that's been allowed to stand, and nobody has, as far as I'm aware, nobody has tried to change it. So you could still argue that it's a reflection of point of view. I'm not sure I would want to argue it in this case, but you could certainly make that point or make that suggestion. I've mentioned the editing history, the edit history, or sometimes known as the revision history. Let me just give you a quick extract from it. Once again, this is part of the Wikipedia research ecosystem. You can access every single one of a large number of intermediate versions. Each time somebody carries out an edit, a new version is saved and it becomes the active version, the live version. Whereas the one that was active, that just gets archived and it remains available. And you can view these, and you can also compare them to see the changes that have been implemented, moving from one to the other. You can also frequently, not always, but frequently get a certain amount of information about individual editors. And here, this just depends on the editor's decision as to an amount of time they have available and the desire they have to make information available about themselves. I chose one here at random, Irikatewi. I chose, oh sorry, a couple of them, Howard 61313. And you can find out that actually this editor has been responsible just about for the whole article. And you find that you know, some of them will produce their own pages about themselves, and they will put templates on saying, you know, where they're from, what languages they know, what their interests are, and so on. And you can find out a fair amount, often, not always, about who the translators are. And very rarely will you learn their name as well. That's the other thing. Okay, so that's another aspect of the research ecosystem. And then there are the talk pages. And once again, these can be each page, each article potentially has one if it's activated. And this is used by active editors to discuss topics of relevance to a particular page and to ask other editors' opinions and so on. Okay, so a little bit about editing Wikipedia and point of view, and translating. What's different about translation, about Wikipedia translation, and then also the impact, specifically the impact that translation can have on point of view. So translation is only one of a number of ways of getting information from one language version to another. Types of transfer, I refer to these as. And here is probably not a complete list, but a reasonably extensive list of different transfer methods. And I guess they largely stand to reason. And these are different ways in which, of course, one article can influence another structurally as well as in terms of the wording. Unpost-edited MT is highly deprecated by the Wikipedia or Wikimedia organization. They even say that unpost-edited MT is worse than nothing. They really don't like people doing that, and yet it does still happen. How are we doing? Okay, still okay. Need to a few more slides. Just need to move on a little bit. Okay. So what is special or what is different about Wikipedia translation itself? Well, in many ways, it is fundamentally different from most or many or most other types of translation that we're probably familiar with. And one of these differences lies in the fact that in Wikipedia translation, individual translators can decide, first of all, whether they want to translate anything, and then what they want to translate and how much they want to translate, and they stop when they get fed up, because it's obviously volunteer. Nobody, I can't say nobody gets paid, but that's not the standard model. You don't do it for payment usually. And you produce your wording, you upload, you make it go live, and then you lose control over it, because somebody else can then come along and to use a Wikipedia phrase, they can then mercilessly edit the original editor translator's wording. Okay, the original translator editor can revert it if he or she wishes to, and thus launch what's sometimes known as an edit war. But basically, once wording on Wikipedia has gone live, it takes on a life of its own. And this means that in a Wikipedia context, not only the target text, but also the source text are constantly evolving. I refer to them as moving objects. They don't stay still. They're always on the move. They're always developing. And that means that the source text, target text correspondences that may be observed at one particular point don't continue necessarily to remain in place. And they can start to deteriorate or to decay or to grow weaker. As someone might come along and edit the translation, or indeed someone might come along and edit the original, and the two potentially can start to diverge. And as I've already mentioned, no finalized version really of any Wikipedia article. There are a few exceptions, but basically no finalized version is ever reached. There is also a blurring of the distinction between translation and other activities, such as original writing, summarizing, paraphrasing, source sharing. And this is something we see in news translation, an activity known as trans editing, which combines, news editors will typically combine all those activities, sometimes including translation, in order to arrive at the text that gets published, goes live. And then, as we see, translation is but one of a number of different transfer types. When we're researching Wikipedia translation, we become very quickly aware, as I've mentioned, of the collage nature or the patchwork nature of Wikipedia discourse. Okay, and in fact, there is a tool which will highlight this for you if you want to see. It will attribute particular pieces of wording to particular editors, and that can be quite illustrative as well. Wikipedia translation, the phrase, the term, it doesn't just take in translation between editions, but it would include any other acts of translation that occur in order to get a wording into a Wikipedia article. So very often from non-Wikipedia sources. As standard, I would say, wording is copied without any kind of attribution to the of the editors in the original version. It just gets recycled, reused. And as I've said probably a number of times now, there is a complete lack of clarity as to the amount, nature, and location of translated material. As we saw from the edit history or revision history, all past versions, unless they are libelous, all past versions of all articles are available forever for people to inspect. That said, the process of untangling or charting the way in which a pair or the wording, a precise piece of wording in a pair of articles has developed and evolved is quite complex, quite painstaking at times, but it's an important task if you want to get to the heart of the wording and the significance that it has. Okay. So what is this ecosystem I keep referring to? I would argue it's, well, I call it almost a complete self-contained but vast research system. It's not complete, obviously, we do need to supplement it. But the amount of information, I think you probably got this message by now, is quite significant. So we get potential source and target texts in, I do beg your pardon, I missed the fact that I referenced this number. It's not 312 anymore, it's 320 something. I didn't update that, my apologies. It's probably about 326 now, something like that. Different active language versions. And all of these remain accessible for people to inspect. And you get meta information about each individual edit as well. Who did it, how big it was, when it was done, and then a little comment as well. Large amounts of commentary, discussion, and then also translation guidelines. And there is a researcher actually who works on looking at translation guidelines. Translation requests as well. You can request that a page be translated. Figures, statistics, analysis, and then third-party tools as well. I suppose strictly speaking, they're not part of the ecosystem, but they're linked to from within the encyclopedia. And then, as you've seen, information on, and sometimes also access to the translators themselves. You can, I don't think people will give typically they won't give a live email, but you can message them within Wikipedia. And then often I think, full records of their activity, those are logged automatically, whether the individual editor likes it or not. And in terms of the point of view, parallel articles can differ very much in terms of the point of view that's put across. And I hope that the three brief examples I've shared with you make this clear. And here are some of the ways in which this can be reflected. So the balance, the structure of an article, the range and the focus of the information that's provided. And you can see that how that was reflected in the tables of contents I showed you earlier. The selection of different parties, reactions and comments. Sources, the sources chosen for major quotes and expert opinions. If you look in detail at the English expert opinions, or the expert opinions quoted in the English version and in the Russian version, there are definite differences in emphasis. The level of tolerance for controversy, the tone adopted, and of course the whole idea of point of view. I mean, we talk about point of view as if it's a single unvarying thing, but point of view can be quite subtle, and you can have different points of view, of course, advanced within a single article. And of course, the point of view can evolve as the article evolves as well. And translation can play an important role in shaping not only an article's content, but also the point of view. And we're not quite ready to get to the conclusion, because I've just got a few more slides. I wanted to talk a little bit about the methodology that can be used in order to track down translation evidence of translation. And it's, I suppose it's part of digital humanities in a way. I use a variety of online tools, digital tools for different tasks, identifying the relevant research material and then gathering numerical information, tracing usage of key terms and concepts and so on, observing and studying how different digital objects develop and evolve, seeing how user attitude is developed or was reflected online, and also, and I haven't talked about this really, but also possibly, potentially producing data visualizations. Now, in practice, we have a very large number of tools available through Wikipedia itself. Many of them are in the edit history, which I've referred to a couple of times, page view statistics, including lang views and site views. And then you can use those to obtain numerical data on a set of parallel articles, for example, and that can provide quite a lot of useful contrasted information. Revision history statistics. And then the pages translated from, that's useful if you wanted to get an idea of the size and the direction of translation flows. And then you also get third-party tools, and there are quite a few of them. One I found quite useful in the past is one called Manyipedia, which allows you to view two different language versions of an article in parallel, in parallel on the screen, to help you try and spot correspondences. But then also there's this Wiki Blame, which I've referred to a few times, which allows you to pinpoint when a word or a phrase or a key piece of wording first appears in the history of an article. Okay, and that's what Wiki Blame looks like. You can access this via the revision history, and you simply specify the language version that you're interested in, language edition. And it's broader than just Wikipedia. I've only ever used it for Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is one of 12 or 13 projects that are being developed by the Wikimedia Foundation, which is the overarching organization responsible for Wikipedia. Then the name of the page, and then you put in your piece of wording. In this case, it was a name of somebody I was interested in. And you can see it checks, you can specify 500 is the default. It's not always enough, but you can start with 500, and it just goes back in quite a clever way, checking specific articles and trying to pinpoint when, in this case, when the name Kadyrov first appeared. Okay. What we've been trying to develop is an alignment tool, and this is going to be released hopefully probably next month now, but it's nearly ready, and it will potentially allow you to analyze a pair of Wikipedia articles, and it will highlight in the interactive mode. I can't demonstrate this at the moment, I'm afraid, but there's an interactive mode which will highlight for you pairs of sentences which appear to be translation pairs. Just checking the time. Okay, I do need to wind up. I'll wind up very shortly. And then also, it will produce, you can download it in Excel format, pairs of sentences. And it starts with the ones which have a closest similarity score, or closest similarity, highest similarity score. And probably all of these are just extracts of the sentence. You can't see the whole thing. But all of these are, given the scores, these are likely to be translation pairs. And I can just see that they do indeed seem to be like that. And by the time you get down to about 1.08, the alignment is starting to get a bit dodgy and a bit less reliable. But these do need to be checked manually, but it's a way of building up a corpus of similar sentences. It's quite useful. And as I say, it's going to be released shortly, and hopefully it will be, once it's been tested and we know it's stable, hopefully it will be made available publicly for scholars to use. And that's it. There we are. I seem to have put the, I was just moving the conclusion slide, and I seem to put it after the thank you slide for some odd reason. But anyway, I'll thank you first, and then I will give you the conclusion. I couldn't, I suspect there aren't very, well, there are some Cantonese speakers I know, so you have been included as well there, as indeed have any Russian speakers, of whom I think there are probably no Russian speakers, well, not many. Anyway, you're still being thanked in Russian as well. But anyway, let's go to the conclusion now, and the brief conclusion. So just a few things we can say about Wikipedia translation. Exemplifies the breadth of translation practice on the web. It does, I believe, expand our understanding of collaborativity, in that individual editors can believe that they are working on a self-motivated basis, but in fact they are contributing to possibly to a translation event without even knowing about it. It does challenge our understanding of translation. That slide I showed you earlier, what's special, what's different about Wikipedia translation. And I suppose it acts as an illustration of the often complex provenance, is the word I use, or development, background development of the information and knowledge that we rely on. So I will go back one slide to say thank you very much once again, and here are the references, and that's it. Thank you very much.